I am here with David Brown. He's the founder and director at the Good Space Company. And I can't wait to share his story. I have to share first that, this was probably overdue. David and Ashley have been in our community manager program. And so I've kept an eye on their space, but David responded to my email about how it's really hard to sell flex desks and said, well, I sell flex desks. Why do I not have a problem selling flex desks? So I said, let's talk about that on the podcast. So David, thanks for making time to do this. I am looking forward to hearing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really glad to be here. Yeah, it does feel like a long time coming.
Okay, so let's start with your co-working story. You have an interesting background. I mean, nobody ever has a background that necessarily makes sense for co-working, but born in Houston, spent some time in North Carolina. Now you're in London, and your sort of work background, all roads don't really lead to co-working if you look at it. So tell us how this happened.
Yeah, of course. So I spent probably the first chunk of my career in finance, banking, and sort of, a general business overview, if you will, and always had an eye and a thought towards entrepreneurship, but didn't have any appreciable skill set. I wasn't an engineer, so I couldn't start an engineering firm. I wasn't an architect. So it's hard to go build something when you're like, I don't have a thing. So kind of just was waiting for the right idea, the right thing to come across. And a variety of factors led us to opening a textile manufacturing company in North Carolina. And I ran that for a few years, and we were producing lots of home decor products, amongst other things. And so that was, kind of one of the first forays into business ownership and trying to do something on my own, and learned a ton there. And as I was working there, one of the things I did was I joined a co-working space in town because, working next to sewing machines whirring or people running around, it just wasn't conducive to the kind of work that I was needing to do, which was, keep track of the accounts and make phone calls and do all these things. So I joined a co-working space in town. And, once I sort of exited that business, co-working was something that was on my mind. And I thought maybe there's something for me here. So I ended up getting into it, though we did it overseas, which is another piece of that.
Totally. Okay. So, what was the draw to move to London?
Yeah. So
your Southern accent, do you ever listen to Caleb Parker?
No, I don't.
Okay. He has a podcast. It's a little more like maybe big picture asset owner driven around like flex workspace. But I love listening to him because I think he's from Atlanta and he has this like Southern accent, but he's lived in London for a long time. So it's like, I always find that such an interesting mix.
Yeah, I'll have to look him up. That's great. But while I was working in the co-working space back in Raleigh, I kept thinking every time I would wake up and I would decide to go to work, it was this debate whether I should go all the way in. The space was kind of in the central city. So it was not a far journey, but it was more than like popping around the corner. And I would make this debate about, should I go to the coffee shop that's a 5-minute walk, or should I go all the way into the workspace? And one day I was like, why can't these things be the same? And so as I was kind of thinking through that model, we took a holiday to visit some friends in London. And I was walking around some of the kind of villagey neighborhoods in London. It just all made sense. And I was like, this is where this really works.
I love it.
There's 20,000 people in a circle, a 5-minute walk kind of circle. So there's plenty of demand within a walkable radius. And the neighborhoods are very kind of village centery. And so having a space right there really made a lot of sense, especially when sometimes it can be an hour commute by tube into where their office might be. So we had this idea in the kind of fall, spring of 2018, 2019. and started to make our move middle of 2019. And we're planning to open the space. We actually had an opening date set for April 1st, 2020. And of course, that didn't exactly happen
It's
according to
amazing
plan.
how many people, I mean, you listen to the podcast, like that story is so common right now. Yes, but here you are. So thank
Here we
goodness.
are. Yes,
Yeah.
thankfully it's worked, and we're still running and expanding. So that's good.
So you moved a family with 3 kids and you had to acquire some commercial real estate in London. Although the interesting thing, so to get to your flex desk question, so you kind of like ran into a lot of things that are so relevant now, right? Your whole like human behavior of like having to talk yourself into, and you're not like a lazy guy, right? You're a business owner, you're like, but this debate every morning, like, do I really want to go all the way into, downtown or
Right.
neighborhood coffee shop, which is like suboptimal in some ways, but closer.
Right.
Right. And now we're like in this phase of human behavior where everybody's like, where are all the people? Well, this thing called inertia has everybody like at home.
Yes.
Because it's just easier, like path of least resistance. But your concept of like, why don't we build spaces closer to where people live maybe doesn't work in North Carolina because there's not the density, but
right. Yeah. And what we found was that if you get in a car, it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or 20 minutes as much.
I think
if it's
totally
a walk
right.
instead of a drive, or a walk instead of a longer commute, that totally changes the argument.
Yeah. The density piece is super important. So you also brought to mind with your flex desk notes. And I was thinking that kind of density that you're describing is not, there are not that many cities that are that dense, right? Because you need a big city and it needs to be, it's like LA is not that even, right? Like it's a big city, but it's drivable.
Right.
Yeah. I remember, so a couple things about London, right? There's like more flex and co-working in London per square mile or whatever than anywhere else. So it's an interesting everywhere. Market, and people are more aware, which I think, So, okay. So you found this neighborhood. Tell us the rest of the story. So 2020 bad time, but found the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly. We found the spot. We were in the neighborhood. I mean, we live 5 minutes from where we ended up opening our first location, and really we ended up trying to replicate kind of what I wanted in a work-life balance, right? So my daughter's school is on, like, we walk past the workspace to her school, and then I come back another minute and I'm back in the space. And so we really, there's restaurants, there's other things. It's this like kind of 15-minute city dynamic that we've heard a lot about over the last couple of years. And so we really just wanted to replicate that and find out, I'm certain there are a bunch of people who, would like to have a place that's like proper place to work, good internet, good coffee, and people around. Because working from home, while the flexibility is really enjoyable, actually being at home usually isn't that great, particularly in a big city where your house is not very big. Totally. Your flat maybe 700 square feet, or you might share with 3 or 4 different people, or you might have your kids and they're all right on top of you. So having a place out of the house, but is still really convenient, gives you the flexibility, and you kind of get both and in that scenario. And so that was the pitch. And, the pandemic basically convinced everyone that it was the right idea for us. Like, we were trying to think that, before pandemic. And then they said, well, now everyone's remote, go figure it out yourselves. And so we had people, once we finally were able to open, we waited for the first kind of wave of COVID to go by, and kind of later in the summer, we were able to open the doors. Kind of, we spaced out the seats and didn't have as much desk density inside the space as we would have otherwise, but opened the doors and really just said, we actually had a marketing campaign that was leave the house, not the neighborhood. And it was, the idea is, just come out, like, and everyone was really craving it. We had so many people, I can't tell you how many people came in and they said, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I need. I need a place to go. there was usually like 3 use cases. It was my office is closed and I don't have a place to work at my house that's very productive, so I need a place to work. I'm happy to work remotely, but I don't, my kids or my partner or somebody is in the way, so I need to get away. Or I'm just really lonely and I just want to, I live by myself and I need interaction with humans. And so we were answering kind of all 3 of those for people. And so it really took off, for the fact that there was a pandemic and that people were still being encouraged not to leave the house. Like, we really kind of took off. We were doing all of the safety protocols that we needed to do, but it was pretty quick that we were saying, I'm sorry, we're kind of out of space, because at that time, and then we were able to expand it once we could put more seats back in. So it's been a great story, but it really feels like we were just helping people solve a problem that they all of a sudden knew that they had.
Yeah, a little right place, right time, but also right offer. What do you think it is, besides the sort of internal factors that some internal, external, like, sure, what is it about the space or the vibe, or what do people love about it?
Yeah. People do often come in and they're like, we actually have a competitor that's kind of around the corner, opened about the same time as us. And so often they'll visit both places before they come into ours. And, often if they do end up joining, they say, we just like the vibe here. There's something about what we do that resonates. And, sometimes that's hard to really quantify, but I believe that our intention is that the space doesn't feel like an office. It doesn't feel like you're going to work in the sense that, you have to be put together. We really want to feel like you're going to a friend's place, or, that cafe kind of culture, but with all the things that you really need. So we have music playing, we don't have a reception desk. We try to meet people like walking and kind of standing around rather than like behind a desk. A lot of people walk in, they're like, oh, like, can I buy a coffee? And I was like, I'll give you a coffee if you want to come hang out for a minute. And so it sometimes gets confused for a cafe or a pub. We try to keep the door open. We happen to open right up onto the street, so people walk in and wonder what's going on. And so that's been great marketing, obviously, as people walk by. So I think that's it. I mean, it's really, we just try to be, it's a joke. We try to be normal people and just welcoming and kind. And, we don't have like a specific niche that we cater to in terms of industry or anything else. And it's just sort of like, hey, like, we're cool, you're cool, like let's work together. All right. Sort of this idea, like original co-working kind of started like, hey, I need space, you need space, let's push our tables together and like work together. And we kind of wanted to bring as much of that to it as we could, with it being like well designed and thought through, not just like vintage, thrift store stuff, but it was like, let's make it so that people feel comfortable to walk in and just try something, that they don't have to feel like they have to ascend to any, mantra or, some well-known workspaces, kind of have this like aura about them that says you kind of have to be in our club to be part of our club, and we want to be, it's for everyone and you can do it. And we built our memberships so that there's ones that are fairly inexpensive so that you can jump in even if you don't have a big budget and your company's not paying for it, but you can be part of what we're up to.
What are your most common, what's your most common membership?
Yeah, we have one that we call the Flex membership. And what we do, it's 10 days per month. And we don't tell you have to book those days in, or they don't have to be the same day. So it's basically 2 days per week plus maybe 1 or 2 to play with. And that's even for people who pay for different memberships, it feels like that's kind of where they end up settling into. And that feels like the new world, right? Now it's like maybe one day at home, a couple days in the co-working space, and maybe one day down at the real office if they have one, or they're in meetings a couple days and they have a space to work a couple of days. And so that feels like a pretty good balance, and that's the height of the bell curve.
So yeah, I feel like you've kind of hit the sweet spot, which is challenging with the 10-day, right? I used to talk about like the 10-day is such a nightmare because that's basically what everyone wants, even pre-pandemic, right? If you had the choice of work, you're probably not going to the same place every single day. But it's a tough model. You have to have enough lead volume, and close those leads in order to make that work from a sustainability standpoint. So the density that you have probably helps that a lot. And it sounds like, to your point, it's hard to say exactly what it is. You got it right. You've got an offer that people in the neighborhood offer, meaning like whatever the design, the feel, the whatever it is aligns with what people are looking for. So, which is not, people look at, and you worked at a you worked out of a co-working space before. And I think a lot of people start spaces and think it's really easy to reverse engineer the business. And it's like the back end stuff is not that hard.
Right.
But it's putting all the pieces together and getting it right and like really aligning with what people want. Like you could just get it wrong.
Yeah, we have, with our team now that we have a team, and it's not just Ashley and I, we have these talks and we're trying to figure out like, where do we fit? And there's this pyramid of, three things. One is, product is really the strong point. You're leading on product. It's the best, it's the newest, it's the coolest. The other point is that you're leading on price, right? Like you're going to be efficient, and we're going to lead on efficiency, operational efficiency.
You're like the value option.
Value. And then the third is this intimacy level, customer intimacy. Like, your customer and they know you, and you really lean into that. And it's like, in food service, it's, product is like the 5-star Michelin chef, the efficiency is fast food, and then intimacy is like an at-home, chef in your home kind of thing. Like they're making you what you want, stuff like that. And so like you have to be on this map somewhere. And we're never like, a day after we open, even if we have the coolest furniture, it's not going to be the coolest anymore, because someone else is going to open up with something else, and they're going to have better tech, better furniture, better, cooler place. We can be super efficient, but we're never going to be as efficient as the big players that have the money and things to spend on that. So the only place where we can compete is in this intimacy zone. And that's what we lean into every week when we have a team call, and every time we talk about it, it's like, how do we make sure people feel valued and want to be here? In fact, we took away terms on almost all of our memberships. We do have a few small offices, and we keep kind of a 1-year term on those, but dedicated desks and another thing. And we don't have 12-month contracts. We don't have 6-month contracts. We said, if you want to be here in 12 months, we would love it. And we want you to be here because you love it, not because we've locked you into a contract. And I think there's actually data that suggests that, having an end date actually prompts people to think about whether or not they're doing it. And so, your life of, and your membership life is actually longer in a no contract scenario.
Yeah. So I mean, I just love everything that you said. You're being super intentional. Yeah. And you're keying in really on the people aspect of it, which.
And it's the hard part to replicate, right?
Totally.
Anybody can put in, fancy desks and good Wi-Fi, and a lot of the big, players think that that's all it takes. And I would argue, and I know you would, that that's not all it takes. That's the bare minimum.
Yeah. So, how big is your space?
So our space here is 3,000 square feet. Wow. So that's our first spot. Yeah, it's quite small. We maximize it though, because in London, you don't waste any feet. So one thing I wish we had more of is storage. We don't have enough storage. You never have enough storage. But we have a pretty nice density of use space in here. And we have about 115 total members that use that 3,000 feet.
Right. That's it. I mean, that's amazing. And is your event space like dual purpose space, or is that separate?
It is. It's the same.
Okay.
We move all the furniture out
I
for
was trying
events.
to tell from the picture. I was like, is that okay?
Yeah.
That's why it's after hours. So you
That's
have
right.
it set up so you can move everything out.
Exactly. So yeah, we designed it intentionally with tables on casters that flip top and chairs that stack and things like that.
And how important is your event business to your revenue?
Yeah, right now it's about 15% of our total revenue. I'd like it to be 20 to 25%, I think, long term. And if you think about it, the weekend, 2 days out of 7, it's 28% of the week. And we pay rent on this building to have it 7 days a week. So we need to utilize that. So I figure kind of as a proxy, we should be about 25% revenue being earned on those other times. And so that's where we're headed.
Yeah. I have not thought about it that way. I think that's an interesting way to think about it. How do you manage? So talk about your team. How do you manage events on the weekends with 3 kids at home and a dog?
This may be the part that we're working to try to really figure out. But I did mention that we have that we live close by, and so that helps. I can pop over if I need to, but that's not tenable in the long term. But in terms of getting it going, that's how we've managed it. But we do have now, we have a few team members that help. So it's myself, my wife, full-time in the business. And then we have a full-time team member called Joel, who works across this site and our newer location on the other side of London. But he shares his time, so he's around. And then we have a few, I don't know, we call them ambassadors, or, people who are getting probably, comped on their membership to help us out in a variety of ways. But the cool thing about it is a lot of our members, they're excited to come back for things and help, because they see it as part of, like, this is their space, this is fun. Yeah. So if we have a music gig on the weekend and we say, hey, someone, would anybody interested in running the bar for this music gig? People are like raising their hands and saying, yeah, I'm in for that. I can get live music and run the bar
in their neighborhood.
Right. Like with a bunch of friends. Like, that sounds great. So that's how, it's very like organic in that sense. And so it's worked well. We are trying to find someone part-time to help us like really manage that well, so that we can get to that, a little bit higher percentage, and really get more of those. But just someone to be on site and make sure things run smoothly, and that things now that we're having multiple events in the same day, maybe that there's an easy transition between one to another. Yeah.
So in terms of event across the board, music gigs, birthday parties, whatever, it's a neighborhood space and they're not business related events.
Yeah. I mean, we have everything. I mean, everything from, like I said, music gigs, we have kids parties, we've had baby showers, we've had, we've had to have corporate kind of trainings. We've had corporate parties. It's kind of like whatever's around, whatever people need it for. I mean, another thing about London is space is hard to come by.
Yeah.
Think about hosting, your 5-year-old's birthday party in your 1,000 square foot flat, with no garden. That's not a real exciting prospect, so if it's not, and then the weather in London isn't necessarily, you can't count on it. So doing something in the park or outdoors is not always something possible. So having that space and for it to be really well designed and really attractive, I think people, are excited about. It may be a little more expensive than like a community center, but you get a lot for that as well.
Yep. I love it. Okay. So you mentioned a new location.
Yes. So, I mentioned that we were really reasonably quickly kind of recognized that we had something working, and there was people coming, probably more people than we could handle.
Where did the people come from? Where do you get your lead? Yeah.
So we have walk by traffic. Thankfully, we're on a fairly busy street where people see what we're doing. And we were intentional about that in terms of having the door open and having an A board outside.
Yeah.
Our building is bright blue. On the outside, we were able to paint the outside so you can see from, you're like, what is that? And so that was really helpful, like early days. But now, pretty much everyone that's going to walk by has walked by. I mean, you have a few people move into the area, but you can't depend on that forever. And so now, word of mouth is probably number one. Our members tell their friends, they tell people. And then number two is Google Maps. We've invested time in building out our profile and really playing Google's game in order to turn up on there and show people, I think the most common way to search for a space, if you really know you need something, is you go to the map and you say co-working space near me or workspace near me, and it pops up a map and it has 4 or 5 pins and you click on each one. And so we're like, that's where we need to win. If someone clicks on our pin and it doesn't sell them, then we haven't done our job well. And so we wanted to kind of express the same hospitality and intentionality that we do when you walk in the door on our page. So we have lots of photos of people and things happening, and it looks interesting and like someplace you might want to try out.
I love your website, by the way, which is not related to your Google Maps, but
your website's good.
The building, and is the website new? Is that what you said?
No, it's good. Yeah, we felt like the same idea, right? We want people to get a feel
of who we are. Clear, and you get a vibe, which is still. Websites are like co-working space. You think they're easy, but it's not that easy to keep them simple and get the vibe. And okay, so and do you run any paid ads or Google or Facebook?
We have done. We don't have any active right now. It's kind of like early days. We were obviously running a few, and it's hard to track. I mean, we did all the things to try to track where the leads are coming from, and it's like what are we getting for this? And so it's different things, but I feel like at this point, like if you do the right things, particularly with Google, like you don't have to pay a ton. In our space, we're not competing citywide. We're competing for a tiny circle.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, if we have the reviews and the photos and we're keeping it updated, those things actually really play out well for you.
Yep. And you're in a market where there are a lot of people who know what co-working is. It's been around, for a long time. Flex workspace in general. So, okay. So talk about the second location.
Yes. So we recognized that we had something that was working. And at the same time, like we are in a neighborhood. So there's not like expansion opportunity, like we're not going to be 30,000 square feet in the neighborhood and make that make sense. So we really needed to think outside of that and where can we be elsewhere in London? Thankfully, in this case, we were looking around and our landlord at our current space came to us and said, we have another building. Would you be interested in going into this building? And I actually went and looked and then turned him down. I said, it doesn't really, I don't see it. I don't know if we're ready for that. Thanks, but no thanks. And then a few months later, they came back and said, we think you should look again. Would you be willing to do a management agreement on this one? And we said, well, let's talk about it. Let's look at it. And so at this point, they had done some things and helped fill out other parts of the building. And then now all of a sudden, my level of risk is lowered, and it felt like the right opportunity to go ahead and open the next spike. And so we took the tack of, instead of building a unified brand across all of the sites, that each neighborhood was unique, each individual is unique, and so all of our sites are kind of white label, independently branded. And so we're doing the hard thing on purpose, because we think it matters to really intentionally be a part of a specific community and a place in that community. So our second site is called Groundworks. It's in Chiswick in the west part of London. And so it's got a very different design. I mean, not very different, a different design. It's a different kind of building. And so it takes on its own life and exists in its own way. So that was fun. And it's been really exciting to kind of replicate, to do things again, to think through furniture again and say, okay, what did we learn in the first one? How do we do that this way? I think we really validated a lot of our initial decisions. Luck or otherwise, we made a lot of the right ones. And so we kind of did the same things again, largely. But then we got, the cool thing about doing unique sites and not having to be stuck on a single brand was we could try new things and say, this, what if we did it like this? What if we tried this way? We could do different pricing. We could do different membership tiers and find out, we can do a little like A/B test and say, does this work or does this work? And so that's been really fun. My favorite part of business is the creation stage. And so I've kind of created a scenario where I get to keep creating every time we open a new site. It's like a brand new business, which is fun. For me, maybe it gives me more gray hair, but it's the fun part, I think. And so that's been it's been great. We opened it in February this year, and so we're about 6 months in. We've got good traction, and we're working to fill those offices over there. Which led me to the conversation. We've had a lot more success with flex desks at both sites than we have with more fixed kind of spaces.
So how many square feet is the new space and how many offices?
Yeah, the new space is a bit bigger. It's 3,500 feet kind of in our demise. And then we kind of have some shared space that we kind of just co-opt for where there's more flexible seating that's not really ours, but it's kind of no one's either. So it works.
How many offices?
Oh yeah, that one's got, we went heavier on offices there because I thought that the part of the city made more sense for that. And it was not as, it's not right off the street the way ours is here. So I thought we would get more that kind of, so we have 10 offices in that site.
Okay.
And they're all two desks to 5 desks. So very small.
Oh, but still not individuals.
Correct.
So you could put 5 people in them. Yeah. Yeah. That may be the thing because you're looking for neighborhood people who, who have a 5-person company.
Yeah. So small teams. And some of our 2 desks we've sold as singles. Just they get a little space and they're happy to pay for it. But like small teams are a little harder to find, I think, in that scenario. And I think that's part of it. But the good thing is they're really sticky once they're in. Yeah,
right. Exactly. If that's where they live or that's where
right.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. And then just high level, you don't have to share all the details, but structure with the landlord. Is it
that one?
Or did you have to do construction?
So they covered the CapEx on the fit out and then we have basically a profit share on after operations costs, and it leans in their favor early because they put in all the money. But then we get the upside if we do our job well.
Yep. And so the flex desks there are moving.
Yeah, they're selling, and it's something that we thought we'd have more trouble selling those just given the location, the part of the city that it's in. It's not as busy on the street as our other site and some other places. And so we thought, it might be harder to find people who are just like wanting to walk in and work. But we have good traction on that and people are excited about it. I mean, it looks great. It's really attractive space. So I'm not surprised in that sense. But I guess that's just on the ratio. I thought we'd be a little quicker to fill up some of those other spaces given
I bet it's the size of offices. I bet if you had 10 one-person offices, that'd probably do it.
That's true.
Yeah. But
I don't know that that's financially viable. Have you figured out how to build one-person offices that don't blow the budget?
Right. I mean, that's the big trade-off. And that's why sometimes the management agreement will work if the landlord has a long enough sort of view on, their return. Doing it on a lease is just hard. So it's usually people who own the building or doing a management agreement to put it in the one-person offices. Totally get it. And you might get there. Or you might, have you tried sell the office to 5 people who don't know each other, but
Yeah, I think that's, we're holding off a little bit on that because I think in time we'll find the people. But we are doing a decent bit of like day office rate. So we will just hire it out like a meeting room or something else. And we're getting some traction on that. So it's it's good for cash flow in the near term
Yeah.
until we get it sold long term.
And how do you do on meeting rooms in neighborhood locations?
Yeah, really well, actually. I think we have a lot of use from our members because, if they're mostly flex, if they have a client or, have a long call or something, they'll book a meeting room and, we give them some credit, but
Okay.
they are generally, we have people that pay, extra to go over that, and they just build it into their cost for the month. We have a lot of, there are some other offices in the area, but a lot of them, maybe don't have their own meeting space, or, we have other kind of like retail focused businesses that don't have meeting space and they come use it. Like there's a salon that does interviews and stuff in the meeting room. And so they can just walk down the street, have their interview or team meeting or whatever, and then go back. We have a restaurant that uses it in a similar way across the road. So those kind of things have been valuable. And then we have, the people who are like, I work from home all the time. I don't need a place to work, but I don't want to bring a client to my house.
Right.
So they don't want to necessarily meet at a restaurant or a cafe because it's a little too unprofessional. Yeah. They'll book a meeting room for, sometimes a day, sometimes, just a few hours. So we have those kinds of things have created good traction on meeting rooms, and it's been well.
That's awesome, because I wondered if events would do well, but meeting rooms maybe not, with the neighborhood. So
yeah, I think it's a mix of our client base. I think a lot of co-working spaces could probably say this. I mean, we lean creative. We have a nicely designed kind of creative looking space. It actually used to be a recording studio, so it's got some lots of exposed brick and fun things, and so people want to be here. And so we have like everything from like regular graphic designers and designers. We have fashion. We have lots of media, journalists, podcasters, film, other PR, marketing, kind of all your standard ones that work from a laptop and can do it anywhere. But then we've got, your proper remote workers that we like to say, we are creative, or people who want to be creative, even if they're an accountant or, they work for Amazon or something like that. And so we have these remote workers that do things that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and yet they embrace it just as much as everyone else.
Yeah. Uncreative people who want to be surrounded by, or everybody's creative in their own way. I shouldn't.
That's right. I mean, I would consider myself in that category, right? Like, I don't do any of those like really creative things. I like to make stuff up and figure out how to get paid for it. But
you're creating space, you're creating community, like you're a creator. Totally.
Yes.
How do you handle phone calls? You're in a phone booth.
Yeah. So we have
gray felt.
Yeah, that's right. You can never have enough phone booths. It's kind of like induced demand. You add another lane to the freeway, there's going to be cars that fill it up right up. So if we had 10 phone booths, they would all be full all the time, and we wouldn't have anyone sitting in the open space. So it's just a balance of saying, we have some and we want you to use them. We have little very friendly signs that say, try to keep your time to an hour and then get out. But that works well. But we also don't have any rules against taking phone calls. We just kind of look at people and say, just be considerate. If you need to take a phone call in the space, like, more than welcome to. Ultimately, if you have two people on the phone, they kind of cancel each other out.
Right.
If it's one person and everything else is quiet, it's no good.
Right. The distracting part about a phone call is listening to one side of someone else's. Yeah. But if you're both on the phone, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter. So we just say, if someone gives you the stink eye because you're being too loud, then take the hint and go find another place. But if not, like, carry on. Like, we're all doing business here. We know what we're here for. And that, I think, goes back into the way we kind of manage the space. It's like, look, we don't have a bunch of rules and a bunch of things that say, don't do this, stand here, don't stand here. But it's just sort of like, be a decent human and we'll all get along. And, if that resonates with people, then they want to be part of it. If it doesn't resonate, they can go find a place that does. And that's great, right? We know who we are and we're not trying to be something else.
Which is also hard. I
Yes.
mean, I think it's hard when you're first opening. I see people struggle with that because you have, when you're waiting for people to show up, or even doing your seconds, like there's a lot of time to question, are we doing
Yeah.
this right? Are we doing the right thing? Should we, right? So,
Yeah.
and right. And to be for something is so much
Yeah.
more compelling than not, but it feels risky.
Right.
So
Yeah. I think we go back to that all the time. It's like, what are we actually here for? What are we trying to do? And does this help us do that? We believe that the community aspect is really why we do this.
Yeah.
We want people to connect in real life. I mean, this has taken on even more significance since COVID. Like connecting over FaceTime is great to carry on a relationship. It's hard to build a new relationship on Zoom and on the screen. But even to carry on after a period of time, it's like we need to see each other. And so we want to facilitate those interactions, those kind of chance, water cooler moments, if you will. And so we think about everything as like, are we actually helping that right now? Or is this decision, like if we get more phone booths, does that actually help us accomplish this goal? And it's like, no, it actually doesn't. So we're going to have a certain number and no more. Now, having space is another limiter on that, but even if we had it, I think we would limit it at some point. And then, do we have a bunch of little desks with dividers between them? COVID was actually really hard because we were like putting up plastic barriers is the antithesis of what we're trying to accomplish. So how do we do this in a way that makes people feel safe and actually does give us, the kind of protection that we need, but continues to facilitate the kind of human connection that we're trying to do. And so we had to invent basically a new divider system in our desk area that was just high enough to be here, but you can still see over it, and it absorbs this much sound, but it allows you to see each other and these kind of things. And so it's like I just had to kind of draw that on a napkin and decide this is how it's going to be. Can we get it built and do that? So it's knowing who you are and really sticking to it and saying this is what we believe is the right thing, and going for it full on. And I think you end up finding people resonate. They want that. Yeah. And so, and they appreciate that you stuck to it, and they say, yes, this is what I've been looking for, and some people don't get it, and that's fine because you're not trying to sell everyone.
Yep.
Right. And one of my favorite things about this business is like, I have 115 memberships available. I don't, and there's 20,000 people in a square mile. So I don't have to win everyone. I need the right 115 people. And if they love what we're doing and we love them, then all of us are going to be happy. The business is going to work and we're going to, have a great time.
I love it. So you just opened your second location. What's next? What do the next couple of years hold?
Yeah. I mean, what none of us really know, right? But we do have a third that's kind of in the works, which is exciting. Again, in London, kind of a different part. We'll have east, west, and kind of north, which is nice. I've tried and swung and missed on the South London location a couple of times, so we'll keep working on that. But I think for us, the way we want to do business, we need really good partners in terms of like property owners. Like, we're not going to take a traditional lease. It just doesn't make sense in our business model. And I've gotten really good at sharing, my kind of finance, real estate background has now helped.
Yeah.
I can show them the numbers and say like, it does not make sense.
How to frame it and how to position it in their language. Yeah.
So I can say, the IRR on this for me doesn't make sense. Like I'm never going to pay that. And I'm like, but on your side, you can actually see the return on this. If we do what we do, and now I can show that we can, because we've got multiple examples, you can get the return that you need, the cash flow near term and the asset appreciation on the longer term. And we help you sell the other units or whatever else you're doing. And that's compelling to those people. So we want people that get it, that want, that understand our model, that understand, we're not about just maximizing number of desks that get sold, but we are about really doing that community piece. And we think if we do that well, it will result in sold desks because they want to be there. But that's not the thing that we lead with. We're not here to sell desks to people. We're here to invite people into a community, into a thing that they want to be part of. And it just so happens that they sit at a desk while they're here.
Well, your original landlord was pretty persistent about getting you into a second location. So, but that says a lot for him also, I'm assuming him, but that, he saw what you were doing and he wanted to replicate that. And I think, landlords are people too, right? And he probably feels proud that he's, in an indirect way, making that kind of impact in a community where he owns a building.
Yeah, I hope so. Whether it's a profit motive or a more altruistic goal,
or a combination.
The beauty of it is, I think if we do well, if we do what we intend to do, it can be both.
Yeah.
This is not a zero sum, one or the other kind of game. I think we can do both really good, really valuable community type work and return a market rate or better kind of return to us and to the property owner.
Was your first location a lease?
It was, it was a traditional lease. It was kind of, moving from overseas, no history, no background.
Country, of
there
course,
was another way to do it. So we took a flyer and I'll fully admit we overpay. It's too expensive, but we're hoping that this relationship grows and we can come back to the table and be able to show them the other value that we add and get a longer term solution. But if it's sort of I hate to use the term loss leader, but in some sense, that's how we've had to think about it. It's we know we're not getting the margins we would like to get here, but we had to establish something in order to do this well.
Yep. Well, David, thank you so I could talk forever. You have other commitments today. I have a puppy that's going to need to go out. I have to say I've been super inspired by this conversation. I just feel like I love how intentional you are and how thoughtful you are. I think that my audience is really going to enjoy this. So I'm so glad you responded to that email and said, talk about the flex desk and I'm glad. Thank you for doing that.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah. We'll have to do it again. I want an update in a year or so.
Perfect. Book it right now. We'll come back.
Totally. Awesome. Thanks, David.
Amazing. Thanks.